I grew up in a house where we counted everything, not because we were careful with money, because we had to be. My mom worked double shifts at the hospital, and my dad did maintenance at 3 different apartment complexes. They never complained, never made me feel like their exhaustion was my fault, but I saw it. Every day I saw it. We lived in a small ranch house on the edge of Riverside, California, in a neighborhood that wasn't quite poor enough to be dangerous, but wasn't stable enough to feel safe. The kind of place where half the families were like mine, working constantly, holding on, and the other half had already let go. I learned early that there were invisible lines everywhere. Lines that separated the kids whose parents drove new cars from the kids whose parents took the bus. Lines between the kids who got new shoes every school year and the kids who wore the same pair until the soles flapped open. I was on the wrong side of most of those lines, but I didn't think about it much when I was younger. My parents gave me what mattered: stability, routine, love. My dad would come home smelling like paint thinner and cleaning chemicals, but he'd still sit with me at the kitchen table and help with my math homework. My mom would fall asleep on the couch in her scrubs, but she'd wake up if I needed to talk about something. They worked brutal hours so I could focus on school, so I could have something they never got: options. I took that seriously. I studied hard, kept my grades up, stayed out of trouble. I wasn't naturally brilliant or anything. I just understood that effort was the only currency I had. Some kids could afford to coast. I couldn't, so I didn't. By the time I got to Riverside High, I'd developed a kind of quiet discipline. I wasn't loud, I wasn't popular, but I wasn't invisible either. I had a small group of friends, mostly other kids from working families. We ate lunch together, played pickup basketball on weekends, talked about getting out someday. Normal stuff. I was a decent student, A's and B's, nothing spectacular, but consistent. I liked history and English, tolerated math, struggled with science. I planned to go to community college, transfer to a state school, maybe study business or education, something practical, something that would lead to a stable job. I didn't dream big because dreaming big felt irresponsible. My parents had sacrificed too much for me to waste their effort on fantasy. That was my mindset going into sophomore year. Work hard, keep your head down, build something solid. I believed in the system. I believed that if you did your part, the system would do its part. I believed teachers were there to help you succeed. I believed a lot of things back then. Mr. Harlan taught U.S. history and economics. He was in his mid-50s, had been at Riverside High for over 20 years, and had a reputation as a tough but fair teacher. The kind of guy who'd been there so long he'd become part of the school's identity. Former students talked about him at reunions. Parents requested him by name. He ran the academic decathlon team, coached the mock trial club, and was always visible at school events, football games, fundraisers, award ceremonies. He had a booming voice, a thick mustache, and a way of walking through the hallways like he owned them. I had him for second period, right after Pi-E, which meant I was usually still catching my breath when I walked into his classroom. It was a big room on the second floor, walls covered with vintage posters, Depression-era propaganda, Cold War cartoons, a massive map of the U.S. with pins marking historical events. His desk was at the front, always neat, always organized. He'd stand behind it like a captain at the helm of a ship, surveying the room as we filed in. The first few weeks were fine. He lectured in that confident, performative way some teachers have. Lots of rhetorical questions, lots of dramatic pauses. He liked to quiz students on the spot, fire off questions to keep everyone alert. I didn't mind. I'd done the reading. I could handle it. Then one day in late September, he handed back our first major essay, an analysis of the economic causes of the Great Depression. I'd worked on mine for 2 weeks, stayed up late revising it, made sure every citation was formatted correctly. I wasn't expecting perfection, but I thought I'd done solid work. I got a C-. At the bottom of the last page, he'd written in red ink, "Shallow analysis. You clearly don't understand how economic systems function. See me after class." I felt my face get hot. I read the comment again, trying to understand what I'd missed. Around me, other students were celebrating. Sarah got an A, Jason got a B+. I folded the paper in half and shoved it into my backpack. After the bell rang, I walked up to his desk. He was erasing the whiteboard, his back to me. "Mr. Harlan?" He glanced over his shoulder. "Yes? I wanted to ask about my essay grade. I thought I followed the rubric." He turned around, arms crossed. "You followed the format. That's not the same as understanding the material. I cited all the sources you recommended. I analyzed the policy failures, the bank collapses. You regurgitated information." He tapped the essay on his desk. "There's no critical thinking here, no original analysis. You're just repeating what you read." I felt something tighten in my chest. I thought that's what a research essay was supposed to do, use evidence to support an argument. "An argument requires thought," he said, his tone clipping. "Not just summary, but maybe that's the issue." "What issue?" He looked at me for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression. Something I couldn't quite name. Some students are naturally analytical. They come from homes where these kinds of discussions happen at the dinner table. Other students, he paused, other students need more time to develop those skills. It's not your fault. It's just reality. I didn't know what to say. I stood there, holding my backpack straps, feeling like I'd been slapped. "Work on the next assignment," he said, turning back to the board. "Maybe you'll improve." I left the classroom feeling hollowed out. I told myself he was just being tough, that this was how some teachers motivated students. But the words stuck with me. It's not your fault. It's just reality. The next essay came back with a C. The one after that, a C+. My test scores were fine. I could memorize facts, answer multiple choice questions. But whenever I had to write something analytical, something that required interpretation, I got the same feedback. Surface level. Needs deeper engagement. Lacking sophistication. I started staying after school in the library, reading extra articles, trying to figure out what he wanted. I asked him for clarification on assignments. I went to his office hours. Every time he'd give me vague advice. Think more critically. Go beyond the obvious. Engage with the material on a higher level. I didn't know what that meant. I was doing everything I'd been taught to do, reading carefully, taking notes, building arguments from evidence. But somehow, it wasn't enough. Other students didn't seem to struggle the same way. Sarah, whose dad was a lawyer, would make offhand comments in class about trade policy or constitutional law, and Harlan would light up. "Exactly. That's the kind of thinking we need." Jason, whose mom worked in finance, could talk about market dynamics in a way that made Harlan nod approvingly. They weren't smarter than me. They just spoke a language I hadn't learned yet. One afternoon in November, we were discussing the New Deal. Harlan asked the class why some historians criticize Roosevelt's policies. I raised my hand. "Yes?" He looked at me like he'd forgotten I was there. Some economists argued the New Deal prolonged the Depression by creating uncertainty in the business sector. They thought the government was overreaching. It was a standard answer, straight from the textbook. Harlan frowned. "That's technically correct, but you're missing the nuance. Sarah, can you expand on this?" Sarah sat up straighter. "Well, the critique was really about the shift in the relationship between government and private industry. It wasn't just about uncertainty, it was about a fundamental redefinition of the social contract." Harlan beamed. "Excellent. That's analysis." I felt my jaw tighten. She'd said almost the same thing I did, just with fancier words. After class, I approached him again. "Mr. Harlan, I don't understand. I gave the same answer Sarah did." "You gave a textbook answer," he interrupted. "Sarah gave a thoughtful answer. There's a difference." "What difference?" He sighed like I was exhausting him. "Look, I'm going to be honest with you. Not every student is cut out for advanced analytical work. That's okay. There are plenty of careers that don't require this level of critical thinking. Trade work, technical skills, hands-on labor. Your family probably has experience in those areas, right?" The air seemed to thin out. "My dad does maintenance. My mom's a nurse." "Exactly. Honest work, important work." He picked up his briefcase. "There's no shame in following that path. Not everyone needs to be a scholar. Some people are better suited for practical jobs. You should think about that." He left the classroom, and I stood there alone, staring at the empty desks. I didn't tell my parents what he'd said. I didn't know how to explain it without sounding like I was complaining, and they didn't have the energy for complaints. They were already working themselves into the ground for me. I couldn't add to their burden, but something had cracked inside me. Every time I walked into Harlan's class, I felt it, a low-level hum of anger and shame that I couldn't shake. I started sitting in the back. I stopped, raising my hand. I turned in my assignments on time, but I stopped trying to impress him. What was the point? He'd already decided who I was. The comments on my essays got sharper. Predictable. Uninspired. "Have you considered vocational programs?" That last one showed up on a paper in January. I read it 3 times, my hands shaking, then folded the essay and put it in the bottom of my backpack. I didn't ask for clarification. I didn't argue. I just stopped engaging. In February, we had a class debate on the ethics of westward expansion. Harlan divided us into teams and told us to prepare arguments. I ended up on the side defending manifest destiny, which I knew was the weaker position, but I didn't care anymore. I wrote my notes, practiced my talking points, and showed up ready to participate. The debate started, and I made my first argument. Settlers believed they were spreading democracy and progress, even if we now recognize the harm caused to indigenous populations. It was a standard historical framing, acknowledged the mindset of the time while recognizing modern moral clarity. Harlan cut me off mid-sentence. "That's a shallow defense. You're not engaging with the foundational hypocrisy of the ideology." I was about to, "Let me stop you there." He turned to the class. "This is a perfect example of what happens when students don't prepare adequately. You can't just repeat talking points. You need to think." My face burned. Several students looked away, embarrassed for me. Sarah, on the opposing team, gave me a sympathetic glance, which somehow made it worse. I sat down. I didn't speak for the rest of the debate. The breaking point came in March. We were studying post-war economic expansion, and Harlan was talking about the GI Bill and how it created the American middle class. He was in one of his performative moods, pacing at the front of the room, gesturing dramatically. "This is the power of strategic investment," he said. "When you give people access to education and capital, they build wealth, they create opportunity. This is how you lift entire communities." I don't know what possessed me, but I raised my hand. He looked surprised. "Yes? Didn't the GI Bill mostly exclude black veterans, and redlining prevented a lot of families from accessing those benefits?" It was a legitimate historical point. We'd read about it in one of the supplemental articles. Harlan's expression hardened. "That's a simplistic reading. Yes, there were implementation issues, but the overall program was transformative. I'm not saying it wasn't. I'm just saying the benefits weren't distributed equally. Systemic racism, here we go." He smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "Let me guess. You read one article about redlining, and now you think you understand systemic economics." A few students laughed. Not mean laughter exactly, just uncomfortable agreement. I'm just pointing out, you're pointing out a talking point, he said. You're not analyzing. You're not thinking critically. You're repeating something you read because it sounds smart. This is exactly what I've been trying to tell you all year. You don't have the foundation for this kind of analysis. My hands were shaking. I was just trying to add context. Context requires understanding. Understanding requires background. Background requires... He trailed off, then said more quietly, "Look, not everyone grows up in an environment that prepares them for academic rigor. That's not an insult. It's just a fact. Some students come from homes where intellectual discussion is normal. Other students come from homes where the focus is survival. Neither is better or worse. They're just different. But those differences matter when you're trying to do college-level work." The room was completely silent. Everyone was staring at me. "My point," Harlan continued, "is that you need to recognize your own limitations. You're not stupid, but you're also not prepared for the kind of career that requires this level of analysis. And that's okay. There are plenty of good jobs out there that don't require a degree. Electricians, plumbers, construction workers. These are important, well-paying jobs. You should think about those options instead of forcing yourself into a path that's clearly not working." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I felt like everyone in the room could see straight through me, could see my mom's worn scrubs, my dad's chemical-stained hands, our small house, our careful budgeting, all of it. "Do you understand what I'm saying?" Harlan asked, his voice almost gentle now. I nodded. I didn't trust myself to speak. "Good. I'm glad we're on the same page." He turned back to the board and resumed the lecture like nothing had happened. I sat there for the rest of the period, staring at my notebook, not writing anything. When the bell rang, I grabbed my bag and left. I didn't look at anyone. I walked straight to my next class, sat down, and stared at the wall. That afternoon, I went home and locked myself in my room. I didn't do my homework. I didn't come out for dinner. My mom knocked on the door around 8. "You okay?" "Yeah, just tired." "You want to talk?" "No, I'm fine." She didn't push. She never pushed. I lay on my bed and stared at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over. "You're not prepared." The way he'd said it, like he was doing me a favor by lowering my expectations, like I should be grateful for his honesty. I thought about my dad, who'd never finished high school, but could fix anything. I thought about my mom, who'd worked her way up from an entry-level hospital position to become a surgical nurse. They were smarter and tougher than most people I knew. But Harlan would have looked at them the same way he looked at me, well-meaning, hard-working, and fundamentally limited. Something cold settled into my chest that night. Not anger exactly. Anger would have been easier. This was something quieter, heavier, a kind of clarity. I realized that arguing with Harlan was pointless. He'd already decided who I was. Nothing I said or did in his class would change his mind. He'd built a story about me, poor kid, limited background, no future in academics. And every time I opened my mouth, I just confirmed that story. So I stopped trying to change it. For the rest of sophomore year, I became invisible in Harlan's class. I sat in the back, turned in the minimum required work, and stopped participating in discussions. My grades stabilized at a C+, which was enough to pass, but not enough to draw attention. I stopped going to his office hours. I stopped asking questions. I built a wall between his voice and my sense of self, and I refused to let him through. It wasn't easy. Every time he made one of his comments about practical careers or different kinds of intelligence, I felt that wall shake. But I held it up. I had to. Outside of his class, I kept my grades high. I worked harder in my other subjects, as if to prove to myself that Harlan was wrong. My English teacher, Ms. Reynolds, told me I had a strong, analytical voice. My math teacher said I had a good instinct for problem solving, but none of that mattered when I walked into second period. In Harlan's room, I was exactly who he thought I was, a kid from a poor family with no business dreaming beyond his station. Junior year, I had him again for economics. I requested a schedule change. The counselor told me all the other sections were full. "Mr. Harlan's a great teacher," she said, smiling. "I'm sure you'll do fine." I didn't argue. Economics was worse than history. The material was more abstract, more dependent on the kind of casual fluency that came from dinner-table conversations about markets and investments. I didn't have that fluency. My parents talked about bills and overtime shifts, not stock portfolios and interest rates. Harlan's comments got more pointed. "This would be clearer if you had real-world context. Have you considered trade school? They have excellent finance programs for non-college tracks. Not everyone is meant for university. That's not a failure." I stopped reading his feedback. I'd glance at the grade, then put the paper away. One day in October, he handed back an exam. I'd gotten a B-, which was actually one of my better scores. As I was leaving, he called me over. "You did better this time," he said. "Thanks." "I mean it. This was solid work. Maybe you're starting to figure out your lane." "My lane?" "Your strengths. Not everyone is meant for abstract analysis, but you're good at following instructions, completing tasks. Those are valuable skills in a lot of fields." I looked at him. He seemed genuinely pleased, like he was giving me a compliment. "Sure," I said. "Have you thought about what you want to do after high school?" "College," he frowned. "I really think you should consider alternatives. Community college, maybe, but even then, there are faster paths to stable employment. Apprenticeships, technical certifications. You could be making good money in 2 years instead of drowning in student debt." "I'll keep that in mind." I left before he could say anything else. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, looking at college websites. My parents were both working late. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I'd always assumed I'd go to community college, then transfer to a Cal State school. It was the practical path, the affordable path. But sitting there, looking at the transfer requirements and course catalogs, I felt something shift inside me. I didn't want practical. I didn't want affordable. I wanted to prove Harlan wrong so thoroughly that he'd choke on his own condescension. I opened a new tab and started researching scholarships. I made a spreadsheet. I listed every program I could find: need-based, merit-based, demographic-specific essay competitions. I noted deadlines, requirements, eligibility criteria. Then I started planning. I had 2 years left of high school, 2 years to build a resume that would make me undeniable. I couldn't change my family's income, but I could change everything else. I started small. I joined the debate team, even though I hated public speaking. I volunteered at the library on weekends. I took on extra shifts at the grocery store where I'd been working part-time since freshman year and saved every dollar. I stopped eating lunch in the cafeteria and used the time to study in the library instead. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not my friends, not my parents, and definitely not Harlan. I let him think whatever he wanted. I showed up to his class, did the minimum, and kept my mouth shut. Let him believe he'd helped me find my lane. Because the truth was, I had found my lane. It just wasn't the one he'd imagined. Senior year, I didn't have Harlan for any classes, but I saw him around. He was still running academic decathlon, still holding court in the teacher's lounge, still playing the role of beloved mentor. Students still requested him. Parents still praised him at back-to-school night. I watched all of it with a kind of detached fascination. He'd built his entire identity around being the teacher who told it like it was, who prepared students for reality, and everyone loved him for it. They thought his bluntness was refreshing. They thought his tough love was valuable. I wondered how many other students he'd quietly crushed. How many kids had sat in his classroom and absorbed the message that they weren't good enough, that they should lower their expectations, that their dreams were impractical. How many of them had believed him? I almost had. That was the worst part. I'd come so close to internalizing his assessment, to letting his voice become my inner voice. If I'd been a little less stubborn, a little less angry, I might have listened. I might have given up, but I didn't. In the fall of senior year, I applied to 15 colleges. Most were state schools, but I also applied to a few UCs and a handful of private universities with strong financial aid programs. I spent weeks on my essays, revising them obsessively. I wrote about my parents' work ethic, about learning the value of persistence, about wanting to build something meaningful. I didn't mention Harlan. I didn't mention the humiliation. I wrote about resilience without explaining what I was resilient against. I sent out applications in November and December, then waited. In the meantime, I kept my head down. I finished my classes, worked my shifts at the grocery store, and saved money. I didn't go to parties. I didn't go to football games. I didn't do any of the things people said you were supposed to do senior year. I was too focused, too locked in on the future I was building. My friends thought I was stressed about college. They weren't wrong, but they didn't understand the scope of what I was trying to do. I wasn't just trying to get into college. I was trying to rewrite the story that Harlan had written about me. Acceptances started coming in March. UC Riverside, in San Diego State, in a small private school in Northern California, in with a partial scholarship. Each letter felt like a small victory, proof that someone, somewhere, thought I was worth investing in. Then, in early April, I got a thick envelope from the University of Southern California. I opened it in my bedroom, hands shaking. "Congratulations. We are pleased to offer you admission." I read the letter 3 times. Then I looked at the financial aid package. Full tuition scholarship, need-based grant for housing, work-study eligibility. It wasn't perfect. I'd still need loans for living expenses. But it was possible. It was real. I sat on my bed, holding the letter, feeling something break open inside me. Not joy exactly, something sharper than that, something that tasted like vindication. I committed to USC in late April. I didn't make a big announcement. I told my parents, who cried. I told my close friends, who congratulated me. I updated my Instagram with a simple post, grateful for this opportunity. Fight on. A few teachers commented, including Ms. Reynolds, who wrote, "So proud of you. You've earned this." Harlan didn't comment. I didn't expect him to. But a week later, I saw him in the hallway between classes. He was talking to another teacher, laughing about something. I walked past, and he glanced over. "Hey," he called out. "I heard you got into USC. Congratulations." I stopped. "Thanks. That's a good school. Business program, right?" "Economics." He nodded slowly, something shifting in his expression. "Well, good for you. I'm glad you found something that worked out." I looked at him. He seemed genuine, like he really was happy for me. Like he'd already forgotten every comment he'd made, every time he'd told me to give up, every moment he'd made me feel small. "Yeah," I said, "me too." I walked away. I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. Graduation came and went. I walked across the stage, shook hands with the principal, and received my diploma. My parents sat in the bleachers, both of them having taken the day off work, both of them beaming. That was the moment that mattered. Not the degree itself, but the look on their faces. After the ceremony, there was a reception in the gym. Teachers mingled with students and families, taking photos, signing yearbooks. I was standing with my parents when Harlan approached. "Congratulations," he said, extending his hand to my dad. "You must be very proud." My dad shook his hand, smiling. "We are. He worked hard for this." "He certainly did." Harlan turned to me. "USC is lucky to have you. I mean that." I didn't say anything. My mom filled the silence, thanking him for being a good teacher, for pushing me. I stood there and let her talk, watching Harlan nod and smile, watching him accept praise he didn't deserve. When he walked away, my dad squeezed my shoulder. "Good man," he said. I nodded. I didn't correct him. I left for USC in late August. My parents drove me to campus, helped me move into my dorm, and hugged me goodbye in the parking lot. My mom cried again. My dad told me to call if I needed anything. Then they drove back to Riverside, and I was alone. The first semester was brutal. Everyone around me seemed effortlessly confident, effortlessly articulate. They referenced books I'd never heard of, dropped names of philosophers and economists I was supposed to know. I felt the old familiar panic rising, the sense that I didn't belong, that I'd somehow tricked my way in, that eventually someone would realize I wasn't supposed to be there. But this time, I didn't let the panic win. I went to every office hour. I joined study groups. I asked questions even when I felt stupid. I worked harder than I'd ever worked in my life, and slowly something changed. Started understanding the readings. I started contributing to discussions. I started seeing connections between ideas that I hadn't seen before. The analytical skills Harlan said I didn't have, I built them. Slowly, painfully, through sheer repetition and refusal to quit. By the end of freshman year, I'd made Dean's List. By sophomore year, I'd declared a double major in economics and political science. By junior year, I was working as a research assistant for one of my professors, helping analyze economic development data. I didn't go home much. Riverside felt like a different life, one I'd left behind. My parents understood. They were proud, even if they didn't fully grasp what I was doing. "Our son, the college student," my mom would say to her coworkers, "he's going to do big things." I hoped she was right. After graduation, I took a job at a consulting firm in Los Angeles. The pay was good, better than anything my parents had ever made, but the hours were insane. I worked 80-hour weeks, traveled constantly, lived out of hotels. I helped companies optimize their operations, cut costs, restructure departments. It was soulless work, but it was lucrative, and I was good at it. I saved aggressively. I lived in a cheap apartment, drove a used car, didn't go out much. My coworkers thought I was weird. Why grind this hard if you're not going to enjoy the money? But I wasn't grinding for enjoyment. I was grinding for leverage. After 3 years, I'd saved enough to invest. I started buying rental properties, small units in up-and-coming neighborhoods, places where I could see the development patterns forming. I leveraged my consulting work to understand market trends, to predict where growth would happen. I was careful, methodical, patient. It paid off. Within 5 years, I owned a dozen properties. Within 7, I'd transitioned out of consulting and into real estate development full-time. I wasn't just buying properties anymore. I was building them, partnering with developers, acquiring land, shaping neighborhoods. By the time I turned 30, I was wealthy. Not rich in the flashy way people think of wealth. I still drove a modest car, still lived simply, but wealthy in the way that mattered. I had options. I had power. I could make decisions that affected communities, that shaped economies. I thought about Harlan sometimes. Late at night, when I couldn't sleep, I'd remember his voice. Not everyone is meant for university. I'd remember the look on his face when he told me to consider trade school. I'd remember sitting in the back of his classroom, invisible and silent, absorbing his message that I wasn't good enough, and I'd feel that cold, quiet anger all over again. The call came on a Tuesday in November, 11 years after I'd graduated from high school. I was in my office, reviewing plans for a new mixed-use development, when my assistant told me someone from Riverside High was on the line. Riverside High School? I repeated. That's what they said. Something about alumni relations. I almost told her to take a message, but curiosity got the better of me. Put them through. A woman's voice, bright and professional. Hello, is this Mr. Torres? Yes. My name is Andrea Hill. I'm the new development director at Riverside High School. I'm reaching out to some of our accomplished alumni about a very exciting opportunity. I leaned back in my chair. I'm listening. She launched into a polished pitch. The school was planning a major capital campaign. New science labs, upgraded technology, a renovated auditorium. They were reaching out to successful alumni to help fund the project. She'd done her research. She knew about my real estate business, my net worth, my investments. We're hoping to raise $5 million over the next 2 years, she said. And we're looking for anchor donors who can help us reach that goal. Your name came up as someone who might be interested in giving back to the community. That shaped you. I let the silence hang for a moment. Who recommended me? Several staff members. Your name is still remembered fondly here. Mr. Harlan, in particular, spoke very highly of you. I almost laughed. Did he? He said you were one of his most dedicated students. He was thrilled to hear about your success. I bet he was. If she noticed the edge in my voice, she didn't acknowledge it. Would you be open to a meeting? I'd love to show you our plans and discuss how you might want to be involved. I thought about saying no. I thought about hanging up and never looking back. Instead, I said, sure, I can meet next week. That's wonderful. How about Tuesday afternoon? We could do a campus tour, then sit down with our principal and some of the faculty. Just you and me, I said. No tour, no faculty, just a conversation. Oh, okay, that works too. Should I book a conference room? I'll come to your office. Perfect, let's say 2 o'clock. See you then. I hung up and stared at the wall, my heart pounding. The drive to Riverside felt surreal. I hadn't been back in years. The landscape was familiar but changed. New developments where there used to be empty lots. Chain stores where there used to be local businesses. The high school looked the same, though. Same beige buildings, same chain-link fences, same worn-out basketball courts. I parked in the visitor lot and sat in my car for a moment, watching students walk between buildings. They looked impossibly young. Had I ever been that young? Andrea Hill's office was in the administration building, a small room with motivational posters and donor plaques on the walls. She was in her 40s, professionally dressed, energetic. She shook my hand warmly and offered me coffee. Thank you so much for coming, she said, sitting across from me. I know you're incredibly busy. It's fine. She pulled out a folder and started walking me through the campaign. New science equipment, smart boards in every classroom, a performing arts center. All of it sounded reasonable, even necessary. She showed me architectural renderings, budget breakdowns, testimonials from current students about how these improvements would change their lives. I listened without interrupting. When she finished, she looked at me expectantly. What do you think? It's a good plan, I said. We're hoping to secure commitments from our top alumni first to build momentum. A lead gift would make a huge difference. How much are you asking for? We'd love to have you as a principal donor. That would be a gift of $500,000 or more. In exchange, we'd name one of the new facilities after you. The Torres Science Lab, perhaps, or the Torres Technology Center. I nodded slowly. And Harlan suggested me for this? He did. He remembers you very fondly. He said you were always a hard worker, very determined. Did he say anything else? She looked confused. Just that he was proud to see how far you'd come. I smiled. It didn't reach my eyes. Can I ask you something? Of course. How long has Harlan been teaching here? 28 years, I think. He's actually planning to retire at the end of this school year. Is he? Yes, it's going to be a big loss for the school. He's been such a pillar of the community. She hesitated. Is everything okay? I'm just trying to understand the full picture. How much does the school rely on alumni donations? They're critical. State funding keeps getting cut, and we can't maintain our programs without private support. This campaign is really our chance to secure the school's future. And if the campaign fails? She shifted uncomfortably. We'd have to make difficult choices, cut programs, delay facility upgrades, possibly let some staff go. Staff like Harlan? Well, he's retiring anyway, but yes, if we can't raise the funds, we might have to look at early retirement incentives, reduced contracts, that kind of thing. I nodded. I see. So, are you interested in contributing? I looked at her for a long moment. She seemed like a good person, genuinely invested in the school's mission. None of this was her fault. I need to think about it, I said. Her face fell slightly. Of course, take all the time you need, but I should mention, we're hoping to announce our lead donors at the Winter Gala in December. It would be wonderful to have your name on that list. I'll let you know. I stood to leave. She walked me to the door, still smiling, still hopeful. It really would mean so much, she said. To the students, to the school, to everyone who remembers you. I'm sure it would. I didn't go straight home. Instead, I drove through the old neighborhood, past the house where I grew up. My parents had moved to a nicer place a few years ago, once I'd started helping them financially, but the old house was still there. Someone had painted it a different color, put up a new fence, but the shape of it was the same. I sat in the car, staring at it, remembering what it felt like to live in that house, to count everything, to feel the weight of my parents' exhaustion, to believe that hard work and good intentions were enough. I thought about Harlan, retiring at the end of the year with a full pension and a legacy as a beloved teacher. I thought about all the students he'd encouraged over the years, the ones who fit his idea of what success looked like, the ones who came from the right families, who spoke the right way, who made him feel like a good teacher. And I thought about the others, the ones like me, the ones he'd quietly written off. I pulled out my phone and called Andrea Hill. Mr. Torres? She sounded surprised. That was fast. I've made a decision, I said. Oh, wonderful. I'm not donating. Silence. I'm sorry, did you say? I'm not contributing to the campaign, at all. Oh. Her voice went flat. Can I ask why? Personal reasons. If it's about the amount, we can certainly discuss a smaller gift. Any contribution would be meaningful. It's not about the amount. Then, can you help me understand? You're one of our most successful alumni. This would be such an incredible opportunity to give back. I don't owe the school anything, I said, my voice colder than I intended. It didn't give me anything worth giving back for. Another long silence. When she spoke again, her tone was careful, professional. I'm sorry you feel that way. If you change your mind, the offer stands. I won't change my mind. I hung up. I thought that would be the end of it. But 2 weeks later, I got an email. The subject line read, "Following up. Riverside High School campaign." It was from Harlan. "Dear Torres, I hope this email finds you well. Andrea mentioned that you declined to support our capital campaign, and I wanted to reach out personally. I was disappointed to hear this, as I always believed you had a strong connection to Riverside High. I remember you as a dedicated student who worked hard to overcome challenges. It would mean a great deal to me and to the school if you'd reconsider. The programs we're building will help students just like you, kids from difficult backgrounds who need extra support to succeed. I'm planning to retire this year, and I'd love to see this campaign succeed before I go. It would be a wonderful legacy for all of us who've spent our careers here. Please let me know if you'd be willing to discuss this further. I'd be happy to meet in person. Best regards, Richard Harlan. I read the email 3 times. Each time, the rage built a little higher. Students just like you. Kids from difficult backgrounds, extra support. He still didn't get it. He still saw me as a charity case. Someone who'd succeeded despite my limitations. Someone who should be grateful for his support. I drafted a response, deleted it, drafted another. Deleted that too. Finally I wrote, Mr. Harlan, thank you for reaching out. I've given this a lot of thought and my decision stands. I won't be contributing to the campaign. I appreciate your concern, but I don't believe the school shaped my success. If anything, it taught me that I'd have to succeed in spite of the environment, not because of it. I wish you well in your retirement. Torres. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. He didn't respond. But a few days later, Andrea called again. Mr. Torres, I'm sorry to bother you. I know you've made your decision, but the principal asked me to reach out one more time. We're really struggling to meet our goals, and your contribution would make such a difference. Even a smaller amount. I said no. I understand, but do you know why I'm saying no? She hesitated. You mentioned personal reasons. Do you want to know the specific reason? If you're comfortable sharing. I took a breath. When I was a student at Riverside, I had a teacher who spent 2 years telling me I wasn't smart enough for college. He told me I should work with my hands. He told me I came from a background that didn't prepare me for academic work. He told me repeatedly that I should lower my expectations. Silence on the other end. That teacher, I continued, is Richard Harlan, and he's the one who recommended me as a donor. So no, Andrea, I'm not interested in funding his legacy. I didn't know. I'm sure you didn't, but now you do. Mr. Torres, I'm so sorry. That's completely unacceptable. If you'd be willing to file a formal complaint. I'm not interested in complaints. I'm just not interested in helping. I understand, I really do. And again, I'm so sorry. It's fine. It was a long time ago. If there's anything I can do, there isn't. I hung up. December came. The winter gala happened without me. I saw photos on social media, faculty in formal wear, students performing, the principal giving a speech about the importance of community support. Andrea posted an update about the campaign. They'd raised $2 million so far, still working toward their $5 million goal. The comments were full of praise. So proud of our school, happy to support. Every student deserves the best. I scrolled past it without reacting. Then, in January, I got a handwritten letter. The return address was Harlan's home address, which someone must have given him from alumni records. The letter was short. Torres, I've been thinking about your email, and I wanted to respond more fully. I'm sorry if anything I said during your time at Riverside made you feel discouraged. That was never my intention. I've always tried to be honest with students about their strengths and realistic about the challenges they'd face. Looking back, I remember you as someone who struggled with the theoretical aspects of my classes but showed strong work ethic. I tried to guide you toward practical paths where those strengths would serve you well. If that came across as dismissive, I apologize. That said, I'm proud of what you've accomplished. It proves that hard work and determination can overcome early obstacles. I hope you'll reconsider supporting the school that gave you your foundation, even if you didn't appreciate all the lessons at the time. The campaign is in a critical phase. Your support would demonstrate to other alumni that Riverside is worth investing in. Respectfully, Richard Harlan. I read the letter once, then put it in my desk drawer. I didn't respond. In February, the campaign stalled. Andrea sent out a mass email to alumni, explaining that they were at a crossroads. Without additional major gifts, they'd have to scale back their plans significantly. Programs would be cut. Staff might be let go. The email included a quote from Harlan. "This is our chance to build something lasting for the next generation of Riverside students. I hope our alumni will step up." I deleted the email. Then, a week later, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Hello? Torres, it's Richard Harlan." I sat up straighter. "How did you get this number?" "Andrea gave it to me. I hope that's okay. I wanted to talk to you directly." "I don't think we have anything to talk about. Just hear me out, please." I didn't hang up. I should have, but I didn't. "I know you're angry," he said, "and maybe you have a right to be. But I need you to understand something. I've spent nearly 30 years at that school. I've taught thousands of students. Some of them were naturally gifted. Some of them had to fight for every inch. I tried to help all of them in my own way. By telling them they weren't good enough? By being realistic. The world isn't kind to people who aim too high and fall short. I've seen too many students set themselves up for failure because no one had the courage to tell them the truth. And what truth is that? That not everyone is meant for the same path. That there's honor in knowing your limitations. I laughed, low and bitter. "You really believe that, don't you?" "I do, and I don't think it makes me a bad teacher. You don't get to decide that. Maybe not, but I'm asking you, begging you, to separate your feelings about me from your feelings about the school. These kids deserve better facilities. They deserve opportunities. Whatever happened between us, don't punish them for it. I'm not punishing anyone, I'm just not helping. That's the same thing." "No, it's not." He sighed, long and tired. "Torres, I'm retiring in 4 months. My pension is secure. My reputation is intact. You withholding support doesn't hurt me. It hurts kids who have nothing to do with our history. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you recommended me as a donor." "I recommended you because I genuinely thought you'd want to give back. I thought you'd be proud of where you came from." "I'm not proud of where I came from. I'm proud of where I got, despite where I came from." Another long silence. "I can't change the past," he said finally. "But I'm asking you to think about the future. These kids, I don't owe them anything. You owe yourself something. The chance to be better than your anger. Don't pretend you know what I owe myself." "Then what do you want? Seriously, what would it take for you to help?" I thought about it. I could ask him to apologize publicly. I could ask him to admit what he'd done, to acknowledge the harm. But what would that accomplish? He'd already shown me who he was. An apology wouldn't change that. "Nothing," I said. "There's nothing you can offer." "Torres," I hung up. The campaign failed. In March, Andrea sent out another email. Despite their best efforts, they'd only raised $2.3 million of their $5 million goal. The new science labs would be scaled back. The Performing Arts Center was canceled. Several staff positions, including some teachers, would not be renewed next year. Harlan's retirement proceeded as planned. The school held a ceremony in his honor. Former students gave speeches. The principal presented him with a plaque. Someone posted photos online. Harlan smiling, surrounded by colleagues and former students. Everyone celebrating his decades of service. I didn't look at the photos for long. A few months later, I got one last email from him. No subject line, just 3 sentences. "I thought I was helping you. I'm sorry if I wasn't. I hope you find peace with whatever you're carrying." I didn't respond, but I didn't delete it either. It's been 4 years since all of that happened. The school eventually scraped together enough funding for some modest upgrades, though nothing like what they'd originally planned. Harlan is retired, living somewhere in Arizona, from what I've heard. Andrea moved on to a different school district. I've continued building my business. I've donated to other causes, scholarships for low-income students, community development projects, programs that support first-generation college students. I've funded initiatives that create pathways for kids like I was, kids who need someone to believe in them instead of telling them to aim lower. But I've never donated to Riverside High. People ask me about it sometimes. Business associates who know I'm an alumnus, who think it's strange that I don't stay connected to my old school. I give vague answers, busy schedule, other priorities. No one pushes. My parents asked me about it once. My mom mentioned she'd seen something about the school's funding struggles and wondered if I'd thought about helping. "They did a lot for you," she said. "They did the minimum," I replied. She looked at me, confused. I'd never told her about Harlan. I'd never explained what those years felt like. How could I? She and my dad had worked so hard to give me opportunities. How could I tell them that one of my teachers had spent 2 years telling me I was wasting their sacrifice? "Well," she said finally, "you turned out okay anyway." "Yeah," I said, "I did. But that's not really true, is it? Because I think about it all the time. Not every day, but close. I think about Harlan's voice, his certainty, his absolute conviction that he was helping me by lowering my expectations. I think about all the students who probably believed him, who probably did aim lower, who probably spent their lives wondering if they'd made a mistake. I think about what I became in response to him. Driven, yes. Successful, yes. But also hard, guarded, perpetually focused on proving something to someone who isn't even paying attention anymore. I won. I know I won. I have the wealth, the status, the leverage. I built exactly the kind of life he said I couldn't have. And when I had the chance to help him preserve his legacy, I chose not to. I chose to let the campaign fail, to let the school struggle, to let him retire, knowing that one of his former students had the power to save his life's work, and simply chose not to. That should feel good. It should feel like justice. But mostly, it just feels heavy. I carry it with me. The anger, the vindication, the quiet triumph that no one else sees. I carry the memory of being 16 years old and feeling like I didn't belong anywhere, like I was fundamentally deficient in some way I couldn't name. I carry the years I spent building walls between myself and everyone else, refusing to let anyone see me the way Harlan saw me. And I carry the knowledge that I became exactly what I needed to become to survive him, but I'm not sure I'd choose this version of myself if I could go back. I don't regret refusing to donate. I'm not confused about whether I made the right choice. Harlan spent years telling me I wasn't good enough, and when he needed something from me, I showed him exactly how much that was worth. But sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I wonder if he even remembers my name, if he ever thinks about me at all, if he has any idea what his words cost me, and I realize, probably not. Probably I'm just one student among thousands. Probably he moved on years ago. Probably the thing that shaped my entire adult life is something he doesn't even remember saying. That's the part that keeps me awake. Not the anger, not the vindication, the possibility that none of it mattered to him at all. I'm still successful. I'm still building. I'm still proving something, though I'm less and less sure what it is or who it's for. But I won. I need to remember that. I won. Stories like this happen more often than we think. Subscribe if you want to hear the ones that usually stay unspoken. And if this story made you pause, a like helps the channel grow.